Hey guys, the long-awaited tutorial is here for this Hello Kitty shaker lid. This is the one that I am going to be replicating today. It will be the mold. This is the mold that you guys have in your box. I like to keep it on this on the backing that I gave you guys. We're gonna start with 10 milliliters of resin. I like to use CLEARCAST. I think it's 6,000. I'll give you guys all the details, but I like to pour hardener first. I feel like that really does make a difference, and then I go with the resin part. So it'll be part B first and then part A. Don't believe that part A and then part B. No, it's part B first and then part A. I use a popsicle stick. You guys can use whatever you guys have on hand, but I use the popsicle sticks. The popsicle sticks also came included in your guys' kit. So, I mean, use them. You already got them. I mix slowly, like literally this slow. I probably put like a song on in the background and I'll mix for the whole song. You do want to scrape the sides as you're mixing, because whatever is left around the sides of your cup, that will go untouched if you don't scrape it off. So just scrape it off to make sure that it's being mixed into your resin, and just mix for like the entirety of one song, like a 3-4 minute song, whatever song you choose. I just have random songs playing in the background and I'll just mix for one entire song. Now you do see that I have some bubbles on here in my resin. I do have some bubbles, but those will just go away on their own. I don't really do anything extra to it. I mean, I can do anything extra to it, but with this epoxy, I really like that the bubbles are minimum. So right now you will see that I do have some bubbles in the epoxy. But like I said, those will go away on their own. We do want to start with the epoxy first, because by the time we are ready to use the epoxy, the bubbles will be basically gone. Now these are the bubbles that we have right now. If you guys do notice any streaks in your resin, keep mixing. Don't do this in a rush. Don't mix it all fast, because you're just gonna create so many bubbles that you will not be able to get rid of them. So if you have any streaks, just keep mixing slowly. Clockwise, counterclockwise, it doesn't matter. But just make sure that you don't have any streaks, because that's unmixed epoxy and it will not cure. So once we're done with the mixing, we're just going to set it to a side and we're going to get to our mold. So this right here is the mold that we're using, the Hello Kitty one. These brushes also came in your kit. They are silicone tip brushes. This is my brush. It's all beat up. I've been using it for as long as I've been doing epoxy. It's the same thing. This color pink paint also came, and so did this Ghost Violet mica powder that's from our shop. That is also in your box. The first thing that we're going to do, though, is we're going to start with the paint. The reason why I like to start with the paint is because by the time I'm done with the rest of it, which would be the mica powder, hopefully the paint is dry and we can just go straight for the epoxy. For the paint, I do start little by little, just little drops, and I'll start moving it around, kind of getting it to the edges, but I just kind of put some drops there just to kind of see what I need. I'll go in with more when I need to, but we just start pushing it towards the etching of the mold. The etching is kind of going to be like what's going to stop you from going over it. So that's your border, and you just want to push it forward. Don't try to brush it on. It's not a brush, it's just a silicone tip. So just go in with more if you need to, but you just want to be pushing it around. You don't want to act like you're actually painting it, because again, it's not a paintbrush. So just push it to the edges. Once you get it to the edge, it'll kind of just stay there, and the rest of your paint will just gladly go with it. So now that we are done with that, next we are gonna go to our mica powder, but these little alcohol wipes are also included in your kit. Just clean off your brush. It's just easier to just clean it now. This is the mica powder. It's Ghost Violet, and this little brush also came in your kit. This is the brush that I use for my mica powders. I don't like using the big fluffy brush because then the mica powder it's so loose, so it just gets everywhere, and I don't like that. So I use this brush. This is what I use, and this is what's in there. I start off slowly. I start off little by little, and I just go pushing it, brushing it, and as you can see, it's a Ghost Violet, but I will put it away from the etchings just to make sure that I didn't get like too much. You just want to start off little by little, and as you're doing that, when you do get close to the etchings, then you will be like pushing it to the etching. The etching will stop you, and that way you don't get mica powder where you don't want it. Just push it to the edge of your etchings, and you don't really want to go much further than that unless you do. I don't, so I just use the etching as my border. That's where I'm stopping. I'm stopping at the etching. Now, if you push the brush, when you do get close to these little weird edges of the etchings, then the bristles will just find their way to those empty gaps. So you'll see here in a minute. You could also kind of angle it to the side, which is what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to angle it to go in there, but I'm also pushing it towards the etching. See how it splits? I'm just pushing it in, and the bristles will just find their way. Also, you guys, this is basically in real time, so I'm really trying not to speed anything up. That way we're both done at the same time, and we can just, that way you don't have to pause it, you don't have to do any of that. This is supposed to be like, a tutorial, full start to finish, so we're both done at the same time. Again, you just want to push it into those little spots, and the bristles will just find their way. You don't really think that you have to struggle with this. You just, just slow. Just go with it. Just put some on there and just brush it, pushing it in there, and the bristles will just do what they do, and they'll split, and they'll stop where the etching is. So there we go. We are done with the mica powder. She's all evenly spread. We just want to wipe off our brush with the alcohol wipe. Just have it clean for next time. As you can see, this is what we're left with in our resin. Super minimal bubbles. There's really nothing in there. You saw that it was just sitting there the whole time. Now to do the lid that I did, I added a layer of just clear resin all around the rim. Just one thin layer. That's why we only did 10, but we're not even going to use the whole 10. I mean, no, we did 20, right? Yeah. We're not even going to use the whole 20. Just slowly pour it in there. It'll work its way through. Just slowly go around and just fill any gaps that you may have that the resin hasn't worked its way through to yet. But just a thin layer is enough. That's all you really need. And if it needs help finding its way to the rest of the resin, then go ahead and help it. This is the time for you to actually mess around with the mold with resin in it, because after this, yeah, you probably won't be able to. This is the Pretty Kitty mix that's also in your box, but it's also sold separately on the website if you guys wanted more. But this is what we're going to be adding around the rim. This is one of the spoons that you guys got also in your box. You could use this spoon or you could use the other spoon, but use the spoon. Or don't, whatever floats your boat, I guess. Just work some in there. It's just little random bits going inside the rim. It doesn't have to be exact or perfect. That's the whole art of it. All the little pieces that did not make its way in, you can worry about those later. You can just put them in there, or you can just put them back in your bag of mix. Now just make sure that you have everything that you want around your rim, however much or however little you want. Just make sure that you have that ready, because after this you probably don't want to be lifting up the mold anymore. It's going to stay on the table. It's not really going to go anywhere. So now with the rest of the epoxy that we had left over from doing the rim, this is what we're going to color in our Hello Kitty. The whole head and all. This white, I put it in too big of a little jar. I'll probably put it in a smaller jar for the box, but it's what we're going to use to paint the white background for the Hello Kitty. Now, I like to use my silicone brush for this. You don't have to. I'll just dip my brush into the white paint. It's not really paint. I don't know what it is, but it's for resin. And you just mix it up in there. Do it as opaque or not as you want. You do want to make sure that you get it really mixed in there, because if you have any of it unmixed, it will not really set with the resin, so it would actually come off and it'll probably stay on your mold. So we're going to basically do the same thing that we did with the paint. We're just going to find a way to work it in the middle. We're going to I like to fill in the hole, because then I know that that's taken care of before I move on to the rest of it, because you do want that hole to be completely filled. So I like to start with the hole, and then from there I'll just add the rest of it in little globs, and I'll just work my way into those edges all around And again, the etching of the mold is what's going to stop you. So that's going to be your border. You're just going to be pushing it towards it the same way that you did with the paint. You're just going to do that, but instead you're doing it with resin. And sometimes I do like to use the resin to paint like the little bits from the molds that I have. If you've seen any of my previous shaker lids, you've seen that they mainly all have little bits. You know what? Actually, that's a lie. They don't really all have little bits. But the ones that do have little bits, they are either painted with paint, with acrylic paint, or they're painted with resin. And this is basically what I do. Same thing. I use this little skinny tip, pointy brush, silicone brush, to help with that. Mainly also because with it being a silicone tip brush, you won't scratch the mold. So that's always great because you don't really want any damage to the mold. And then when you unmold everything, it's going to have these scratches that are just going to be there forever because you've damaged the mold with something else, with a different pointy object, whether it's a tweezer or a toothpick or something. I've seen people use toothpicks. I don't like to use toothpicks because they could damage the mold. Like they could scratch it and scuff it, and now you're just left with that on the mold. There's no way to take that off. So I prefer to use these brushes. And you guys got like a whole 5-pack. And they're all different sizes. But this one would be my go-to, this size, this skinny tip. Because even though it takes longer, it's just more precise. So you don't really have to worry about it getting messy or it going over the lines or you messed up. So now because when you do it with resin, if you do mess up, the best thing to do is to wait for that to just cure so you can just peel it off and start over. Same thing with paint. You would do the same thing with paint, just that resin does take longer. But with paint, you would do the same thing. If you do mess up, you would just wait for the paint to dry and then you can peel it off and start over. But I do prefer to use silicone tip brushes, like the ones that are in your box, over anything else. This would be my go-to when it comes to painting the silicone molds. Anything silicone, like even if they're not my molds, just in general, it's better to use something that will not damage your molds. So you could pop the bubbles with your silicone tip, but you don't really have to. You're going to add another layer. This is where we're going to stop for day 1. We're going to let this cure. Since it is resin, you do want this to cure. Now we're in day 2. This is day 2. We're going to do 2 layers right now. This little pretty mix and this one are both also in your box. This is peaches. And then the white one, the white opal one, that one was Fairy Toots. Yeah, one of the kids named it. So that's the name for that one. We're going to use 2 cups, but we're going to make 1 batch of resin. This is going to be a 30 batch. So I'm just going to mark it so you guys can see. It is going to be 15 and 15. So that's 15 to 30. That's, again, we're going to do part B first. First is your hardener, whatever your hardener is. First your hardener, and then we're going to go with part A, which would be the resin. Make sure you get those as even as possible. When in doubt, just go with more hardener. That's why it's better also to start with your hardener, because your hardener will really tell you if you did make it with enough hardener. If not, if you do kind of doubt yourself, then just put like an extra couple drops of hardener. Everything's fine. Don't even worry about it. it's better to have more hardener than not to have enough. So we're gonna just mix it the same way that we did the first batch. Get all those streaks out. It's gonna get foggy, but that's all gonna go away with time. Again, I'm doing this in real time so you guys can see that I'm not doing any tricks to it. There's not really a lot of magic behind it. It's just mixing it slowly and having the right type of epoxy, because some epoxies do have more bubbles, some don't. This one is a thinner epoxy, which is why I think that it doesn't really create a lot of bubbles. It's thin enough where the bubbles can just kind of go up and release, versus like a thicker epoxy. They'll just stay trapped because it's thicker epoxy. It can't go anywhere. It's too thick. So that's why I prefer this epoxy. But just make sure you get all of your streaks out. Make sure you scrape the sides. Go slowly, go clockwise, counterclockwise. Doesn't matter how you do it. Just do it slowly. It's okay. It's okay if it takes a song or two. Sometimes I lose track and I'll be mixing for about a song and a half. But just scrape the sides. Make sure you scrape the sides, because whatever is on the sides of the cup, that's not getting mixed. So if you forget that and then you go to pour, and when you pour you scrape the sides to try to get every last drop, then you just scraped in everything that was unmixed, and that's just gonna ruin your entire project. So right now, these are the bubbles that we are left with on a 30 millimeter batch. Wait, milliliter, right? Yeah. On a 30 milliliter batch, scrape the sides. Now, if you scrape the sides, you see those streaks? Had I not scraped those sides, then all of that unmixed resin would have been there when I wanted to pour it into the mold. And that would have just ruined the entire project. And that's probably what happened to me last time on that fail that I showed you guys on Instagram. Yeah, that's probably what happened. I probably didn't mix. Either I didn't put the right amount of epoxy and with the hardener, the resin, the part A and part B, or I forgot to scrape the sides and it just left all that unmixed epoxy in there and it just ruined the entire project. So just make sure that you scrape the sides. So that's what it looks like now. Those are the bubbles that we have. Nothing compared to all the bubbles that will be in there. It's fine. It would all just pop itself. Remember, this is thinner epoxy, so the bubbles will rise up. We are splitting this epoxy because we're gonna use one part of it for the inside of the Hello Kitty, and then we're gonna use the other part of it to make another layer around the rim. So this is the one that we are going to use for the inside of the Hello Kitty with Fairy Toots glitter. And this is a custom mix that we mixed ourselves. So you probably won't find this anywhere else, honestly. This has like 5 or 6 different glitters all mixed together to make this Fairy Toots concoction. Again, just make sure you scrape it all in there. Make sure it's all very mixed. You can add however much or however little you want. I decided to add a lot just so it can really show through on the other side, since we don't have a lot of area where it would show through. So what is going to show through, I do want it to show through. for the next half, we're going to do I was kind of going for like a strawberry milk kind of look. So I am going to add like a bit of this white, which is the same white that we used to do for the Hello Kitty head. I'm just going to use a bit. I'm just going to use the same popsicle stick. I just scrape off all the excess epoxy and I just dip it in there real quick. And I'll just put it back in my epoxy. And there. That's all I did. I didn't really want to waste another popsicle stick or a spoon or anything, so I just scraped off the excess, and that's what I did. Now this mica powder here, this is Pink Dreams. This will also, you guys will also have this in your box. I'm just gonna use this to kind of give me that strawberry milk. It's a very nice pearlescent, but it has like a very light blue like twinkle to it. You guys can probably see it, but I'm gonna mix the white first because we do want to make sure that this white is gonna be mixed in well, because again, if it's not mixed in well, it won't set. So when you do remove your finished piece from your mold, you'll see that it's in there. You will notice that there will be white, like a white wet spot on your mold, and that will potentially ruin your project. Just make sure you mix it all very well. A little bit goes a long way, so you really have to mix it very well sometimes, because sometimes it just sinks to the bottom, and it's probably because I dipped it with my popsicle stick with wet epoxy on it, but it's fine. It'll be fine. We just add a little more and it's all gonna be fine. So we just mix it in there, make sure it's all mixed in there, make sure you scrape the sides. You do want to get this all very well mixed. And now with the other little spoon, we're going to put just a little bit. I don't really put a lot because, again, I'm going for like a strawberry milk kind of color. I'm not really going for like a very vibrant pink. So just a little bit of that Pink Dreams mixed in. Now this is the peaches mix. This is also a mix that we mixed here. It has like, I think this one has probably the same, about 5 or 6 different glitters mixed in it. I just used a hint because I really do want the strawberry milk color to pop through more than the glitter. So I just used a little hint just to give it a little bit of sparkle, just a little bit of something. I didn't really want a whole glittery rim because we already used the Pretty Kitty mix. So I really wanted the strawberry milk color to really pop through it. Any of the mica powder that hasn't mixed, just grab it, just kind of give it a little squish. Sometimes it's just too dry, so it won't really mix in very well. This is the first mix that we did with the Fairy Toots, and we're just gonna pour the whole thing in there. This was about 10 milliliters of the epoxy, and we're just gonna try to scrape all of that in there. This is exactly why I tell you guys to make sure that you scrape the sides when you're first mixing your epoxy, because you see how I'm scraping the sides of this cup to try to get all of it in there. Had I not mixed the sides of the cup when I first made the batch, then I would be basically pouring in unmixed epoxy that just would never cure. And right now, this is the one that we're gonna put in the sides. Try not to really peel open the walls of the mold, because then you're gonna separate it from the first layer of resin. So this is why I like to use the mold on top of the paper, because then I can just rotate it easily without the mold sticking to the table or to any surface that I have it on. I can just rotate it very easily with the paper under it, and it won't really stick to anything, because it's the paper that you're moving. Now with the rest of the epoxy that you have, you want to try to fill it all the way to where it meets that inner layer of the mold. So like right on the edge. That way it gives you a really good layer. And the final layer will be after these two layers of the inside of the kitty and your pink rim. After those two layers cure, you will put in your final layer, and it won't take that much epoxy. You will have some epoxy left, but I mean, it's probably like 5 milliliters that you have left. So there was no way to measure that exactly. So day 3, this is all cured. It's ready to go. We are ready to do our final layer. For this final layer, we're going to do 30 again, so 15 and 15. Remember, part B goes first. I don't care if it says part A and then B. No, you want to go with your hardener first, always. So part B and then part A. Same thing, you guys. We're just gonna mix slowly for about a song and a half. That's just how I time it. I don't really have an exact timer for it. It's just gonna depend on how well I mix it, how slow I mix it, and if I have any streaks left or not, you know, if I scrape the sides and stuff. So just mix clockwise, counterclockwise, sorry, and it should all be mixed very well. See, these are the bubbles that we are left with. Very minimal. It all really depends on your mixing. Like if you start mixing it very vigorously, you're gonna have more bubbles. And also depends on the epoxy, like the quality of the epoxy that you're buying. But these are the bubbles that I have, and it's really like not a lot. All of those are gonna rise to the top and they're gonna pop on their own. And if I do need to pop them, I would just probably lightly torch them or use a lighter. A heat gun doesn't really work well for me. It kind of just moves the epoxy around. Doesn't really do well for popping bubbles. But if it works for you, then it works for you. But I would probably just use a lighter or a torch and just really quickly, because you don't want to burn your mold. My final layer will have pink dreams. Now this final layer will be a little more on the pink side, so I will have a little more pink in there to make it more vibrant. I'm not gonna add any of the white. It's just gonna have pink dreams, because this is the part that's gonna be on the background of the Hello Kitty. So that's what I really do want it to be, pink. I'm not adding any glitter in it either, because I really want the pearly kind of look of the pink that's in this mica powder to really show through. I didn't want any glitter. There's glitter already everywhere else, so I'm just gonna use just the Pink Dreams mica powder just for the background, just for the final layer. And honestly, that's good enough, because this is a really pretty pink, and it's nice and pearly, and it also has like this really, like, if you really look at it, it has like a bluish kind of sparkle to it, but it's not glitter. It's another mica powder that's mixed in with this. So this is like a whole other concoction. All of the mixes that I have in my shop, like the glitters, the mica powders, the polymer clay mixes, these are all mixed by me. They're all one of a kind. You're honestly probably not gonna find them anywhere else. I didn't want to have like a whole stock of glitter, a whole stock of mica powders that everyone else had, a whole stock of polymer clays that everyone else had. I wanted ours to be different, so all of our stuff is all different. None of it is what you're gonna find from other shops or Amazon or Etsy or anywhere. As the final layer, you're just gonna pour the whole thing. I like to start in the middle just to kind of let it work its way out, but I guess it doesn't really matter how you pour it, just pour it. And there we go, you guys. We are on to our final step. Here we go. It's been demolded. I didn't record the demolding part, sorry, but this is it. This sandpaper is also in your kit. It's in your box. I think the numbers are behind it. That way you guys can get more if you guys do like this sandpaper. If not, then use what you have. But you're gonna sand around the entire rim, the inside little circle rim, that little one in there for where the straw goes, and the outer rim. And then you're gonna use an alcohol wipe to kind of just clear out all the dust from the sanding, because if you really don't want any of that in there. This is a Dremel tool. This is what I use to drill all my shakers, whether it's the shaker lids or the little shakers that I make. This is what I use. This, I bought it at Home Depot. So I would suggest that if this is what you're going to be doing, if you're going to be doing shaker lids or shakers in general, this just makes life easier. See, it was just very quick, drilled right through. That's it. And the hole is so tiny, I almost didn't find it. But there it is. And just so you guys can see, it's a perfect size for the tip of your solution bottle to go in through. See? Now, inside of the solution bottle, it's baby oil. The reason why I use baby oil for my shakers is because you won't have any bubbles. This little diamond bling mix is also, well, it's not even a mix, but it's just little pink diamonds. This is also in your box. So I'm just going to add a couple of this, and I'm also going to add a little bit of the Pretty Kitty mix. I really like the pearls in this, so I do want to make sure I get some pearls in there. What I'm going to use is Bob Smith. This is a 30-minute cure. Honestly, that's a lie. This thing, it's like it's already curing in like 5 minutes. You actually don't even have that much time. But this is what I use to bling. This is what I use for most of my shaker lids. I'm actually allergic to UV resin, so I really try not to use it as much. I'll use it if I'm like on a crunch time, but I do prefer this one because this is thicker, and it would really, it's just, for me, it feels more secure to use this. But if you prefer UV resin, then you can go ahead and use that. But this is what I'm using. I just kind of eyeball it. I mix it. When in doubt, I add more hardener, of course, because you'd rather have more hardener than not enough. So we're just going to grab some, and we're going to put it, you have to remember to put it in the inner lid. One time I didn't put it in the inner lid, and my whole thing like just leaked out through that middle hole. And I had to redo the whole thing over, and it was a waste of a lid. It was a waste of the materials that I put inside of it, like the glitter and the charms and everything. And it was a waste of an acrylic topper, because I used an acrylic topper for it too. It was just a whole waste. But just get a good amount. Make sure you spread it all around the entire rim. It doesn't really have to be even, but you do want to just have enough to cover the entire rim. Now this is your acrylic topper. I do send it to you guys with the paper backing on it so that it doesn't get scratched up. You just want to peel off both sides. You want to make sure that you peel off both sides, because that way you'll be able to see through it to make sure that all around your rim is all covered in, it's all touching that little 30-minute Bob Smith epoxy. You want to make sure that it's all covered, so you do want to peel off both sides. And we're just gonna lay it on there. And in your box, you guys have these 4 clips, right? This is what I use to kind of hold it down, hold it in place, so that for me, it just guarantees that it's all stuck down onto that epoxy, and that it's all really stuck on there, and it's not gonna have these air bubbles where the baby oil will leak through. So I just go from opposite sides, and then I go again other opposite sides, and you just want to make sure that you have it on there precisely, exactly, as best as you can. If you even if you have a little gap that's not exactly on there, it's fine, because especially if you're going to bling it, it's not going to be noticeable. But just get it on there as best you can, grip it on there, and you'll see that all of that epoxy is going to be crystal clear, and you're not going to have like these weird edges and stuff. So once that's cured, I probably waited like an hour because I got busy in between that. But see, it's all there. Nothing's coming out. It doesn't look like there's anything coming out. But what you're going to do is with the UV resin, that's what I'm going to seal the hole with. But this is the baby oil, and we're just going to fill her up. We're going to put some in there, and then we're going to kind of like move it around to make sure that we don't have any leakage. Because if we do have any leakage, then we're probably going to have to go in with the UV resin. But with the clips, that's kind of like a safe bet that you're not gonna have any leakage if you really clip it on there very well and you put enough of the 30-minute Bob Smith. But see, I'm shaking it around, I'm moving it around, I'm like kind of like rubbing it on my hand to make sure that there's no leakage coming out, there's like no sign of baby oil coming out. And that's kind of like what I do to make sure that there's no leakage, because you don't want to fill it all the way up and then realize that you have a leakage somewhere. So once I can see that there's not going to be any leakage, anything going on, then I'll just finish filling that up. So right about here, I actually ran out of baby oil in my bottle, and I didn't have any more on hand, and I didn't really want to delay this video any longer, so I just used what I had for the baby oil part. But it almost filled all the way up. You don't want to fill it all the way up anyways. You kind of do want to leave a little bit of an air bubble, because that way when you go to put your UV resin to seal that little hole, it won't try to like come right through it. So with the UV resin, I just put one little drop on it, kind of try to brush it on there, and then I cure it. So see, just brush on a little bit of your UV resin, cure it real quick before you put in another layer. Add another layer if you feel like you need to. I felt like I needed to, and I usually do try to put at least 2 layers just to kind of secure that the hole is sealed all the way, because on your first layer, the UV resin does try to make its way down the hole. So that's why I usually put 2 small layers, just 2 thin layers of brushed on UV resin. You can use whatever UV resin you have on hand, whatever works for you guys. If you do want, you could also use some more Bob Smith. Just know that is going to take you longer. And also, if you do use Bob Smith, you do have to keep your lid standing up somewhere secure where the air bubble is right under the hole, so that you don't get any of the baby oil coming through the hole. I did end up going with a 3rd layer of UV resin just to be on the safe side. I really didn't trust that the first layer kind of had a little dent in it, so that meant that some of the UV resin did make its way down the hole. So just to be on the safe side, I did go in with a 3rd layer. But after that, we're pretty much done here. And there you have it, the Hello Kitty shaker lid. Hope you guys were able to do this successfully. And if anything, as always, you guys can send me a message and ask me any questions that you have.